Hello, it's Tom Thrown here, reviewing yesterday's play at the Tromsø Olympiad for the Wales team. In the open competition, Wales were paired against England, so a very tough pairing there. Some very good chess was played, but ultimately we did succumb to a 4-0 defeat. The ladies' team fared much better, however, with an excellent 4-0 victory over Sudan. So that's fantastic, and congratulations to them. Today I'm going to review an exciting game that took place between Tim Kett, Wales's board 2, and ex-World Championship finalist Nigel Short. So Tim was white and he opened with e4, and Short chose the Sicilian Najdorf defence, which follows this following move sequence. So open Sicilian, normal development, and a6. Idea being that you stop pieces going to b5 at some point in the future. After bishop g5, Nigel chose a perhaps more unusual move with knight c6. It's likely, I suspect, that he wanted to avoid the options that could occur after something like, say, e6 for queen b6, queen d2, and queen takes b2 is known as the poison pawn variation, with an awful lot of theory, and it's unlikely that Short wanted to enter into all these complications in the first round. So anyway, back to the game. So we now get a sort of standard Sicilian position where white will castle queen side, black typically will castle king side, and there will be attacking chances for both on either wing of the board, and this kind of happens here. So we get some normal moves. h6, putting the question to the bishop. Tim decides to exchange and hope that the queen is slightly misplaced on f6 and maybe can gain some time. So again, further exchanges. Tim uses g3 to help his expansion on the king side and to defend the f4 pawn in some instances. So Short recognises his queen's a little misplaced and moves it to the queen side in the next sequence of moves. So further development. Knight comes to e2 to move to a d4, and black castle. So typical plan here is to obviously attack on the king side, what Tim indeed does do. So looks a very promising position for white at this stage, lots of space and with some very strong attacking possibilities. So bishop f6 putting pressure on the knight, c3 to defend. Short decides he'd like to exchange this strong knight and hope to make something of the resulting pawn structure, with the king perhaps being a bit weak on the c-file, and plays d5 to fix pawn structure. Bishop 4, rather annoying move, inducing a slight weakness in white's position. Bishop retreats, king moves to a better square, and black begins his attack. Black now starts to think of his major pieces on the open c-file, takes measures to mitigate against this by moving his rook to h3, which gives good lateral defence along the third rank. Okay, h played to act as a wedge, the idea being that next move g5 can be played and black is unable to close the position, so white will be able to open up the black's king. So this is getting quite critical for black here. It's necessary for black to make some exchanges to avoid being checkmated, and this is what happens. So the queen moves to the c-file, Tim opens up the black king, but just in time, Short to check, giving him the opportunity to exchange queens, which should lead to a safer position for him. So g3 check, king f8, f5, with the threat now of queen takes h6. This simply cannot be allowed. So Nigel Short swaps off queens and enters an ending which he may have some chances to play for a win. Slightly better bishop. So king comes to beat rook g3. This bishop on g2 is rather awkwardly placed. It hasn't got what's called much scope. It hasn't got many squares it can go to. So it's important Tim plays a precisely in this at this moment. So bishop b5, good move, activating the bishop. Rook f2, bishop d3. So the bishop is moving onto a good diagonal and has some potential good outpost squares. So bishop goes to f1. Exchange of bishops, which should be harmless for white here. So short does not do that, and instead we get this following sequence of move, which forces the exchange of the rook, since if the rook were to move, the bishop on f1 would be on 3. Now, after this sequence, we've noticed that the pawn on h5 cannot be protected. So it's important here that Tim plays the correct plan in order to neutralise being a pawn down. And first of all, Tim closes the queen side to stop any opportunity for king to penetrate there, and to move his king towards the king side. At this point, there's two plans for white. One plan is to move the bishop onto d3 to sort of stop black's bishop from going along these b1 to h7, these good squares here, and indeed that's what Tim had chosen. It does transpire, however, that if Tim was simply just to march the king over the board towards the king side and towards the extra pawn, it'd be very difficult for black to make any progress. For instance, a sample line might be as follows: bishop g4, king e3, king's moving to try and penetrate, so king that, bishop moves to attack the pawn, defend the pawn, push the pawn on so the king can try and penetrate via h6. King comes there, king sits behind the pawn, and when the king goes to h6, white has a very simple plan just to draw the game, involving bishop e8 in the f7 pawn, and the only way it can be defended is with the king, say king on g6, and of course the king cannot leave the defence of g6, so this would more than likely have ended up in a draw. After bishop d3, which was played in the game 42, we get the following sequence of moves, and it transpires that black just has enough opportunity to create some winning chances. So let's see how it goes. So bishop g4, king moves towards the pawn on the king side, so pawn advances, bishop attacks pawn, defends pawn, king now is going to try and infiltrate. So we attack pawn on, or Tim attacks the pawn on f7, defends. So the pawn now is attacked. It's necessary for the bishop to defend the pawn, and we reach this position where black is prepared to sacrifice the h-pawn such that the king can now enter into the game. So it's not clear that this is necessarily winning just yet, but after the following fourth sequence where the king infiltrates, white wins the pawn and then moves towards the f7 pawn. So king takes pawn. So now the pawn cannot be stopped from queening. However, white will now win the f7 pawn and also queen a pawn. So let's see how this goes. All forced. So we reach this king and pawn ending, which soon becomes a queen and pawn ending. But it is black to play, black queens first. And after queen g4, it was time for Tim to resign, because he very quickly realised that there's no way he can prevent Short from exchanging queens. And for instance, a following sequence. So if after check, king h8, we get some more checks and we can force the queens off, and then of course we end up with a very simple king and pawn ending, which will just be winning for black. But overall, an excellent game by Tim against an incredibly strong opponent, and very good opportunity to have drawn. We're looking forward today to playing Tanzania, and hopefully we'll have some good news to report tomorrow. Thank you. Goodbye.